Well, I'm going to begin this morning by expressing my condolences to the families and everybody affected by the tragic incident that occurred down in Orlando over the weekend. As I understand, there were 49 people that were killed by this Islamic terrorist and another 53 that were wounded. And we have directed that the flags here at the Capitol and state buildings be at half staff through Thursday. This morning, I'm pleased to be joined by Jean Cressy, who's the president and CEO of the United Way of Story County. She's also the current board chair for the statewide United Ways of Iowa. And she's going to talk about reducing chronic absenteeism in our schools. Missing a lot of school in the early grades often means that children struggle to learn to read, because this is the critical time when they're learning to read. In Iowa, nearly 25% of students did not read proficiently at the end of third grade based on a statewide test in 2014-15. That statistic is an early sign of the skills gap that may keep students from graduating from high school genuinely ready for college or career training. Lieutenant Governor Reynolds and I hosted a Future Ready Iowa Summit in April to elevate the conversation about the next steps in closing the skills gap. Over the next year or so, we will develop a comprehensive strategy to close the gap and to reach our goal of 70% of the workforce having education and training beyond high school by the year 2025. But one step that we are taking now is convening a statewide advisory council to recommend how to reduce chronic absenteeism in the early grades. Lieutenant Governor Reynolds announced this at the summit as she announced the creation of this council. It's critical to increase academic achievement so that all students have the career opportunities they deserve and businesses can obtain workers with the skills they need to grow their companies. Increasing attendance will help make that happen, along with other major education reforms, like implementing our extensive teacher leadership and compensation system, which we're just completing the second year of that, and we'll be in the third year. So every school district will have that program available. The STEM program, which the Lieutenant Governor has co-chaired along with now Chris Nelson from Kemen, focusing on science, engineering, science, technology, engineering, and math. These are a lot of the good jobs of the future in the areas where we see significant growth, and also our early literacy initiatives, including the Reading Research Center and the effort to which we raise private money for, to have pilot projects for summer school this summer. We are grateful to the 30 Iowans who have agreed to serve on the Iowa Chronic Absenteeism Advisory Council, which will meet once a month starting in August to make recommendations by November. The council includes many leaders in education, teachers, principals, superintendents, and school board members as well. This is a problem that schools can't solve by themselves. They need the involvement and support of the entire community. That's why the council includes nonprofit and business leaders, as well as 4 legislators, one from each party in each house. And now I'm pleased to turn the podium over to Lieutenant Governor Reynolds to talk more about the council's work.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor Branstad. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the victims and all of those that have been impacted by this horrific tragedy. Chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% or more of school days for any reason, whether it's excused or unexcused. And in Iowa, that typically means missing at least 18 days a year, which is close to a month of school. Nearly 7% of Iowa students were chronically absent in the 2014-15 school year, and according to the Iowa Department of Education. But those numbers reached double digits in some school districts across the state. The Chronic Absenteeism Advisory Council, however, will focus on kindergarten through third grade because encouraging good attendance habits is really very important early on. Iowa's Child and Family Policy Center published a report in April that found good K through 3 attendance is strongly correlated with reading proficiency by the end of third grade. The report tracked the attendance of students from kindergarten in 2010-11 school year through third grade in 2013 and 14. Here are some of the report's key findings. A third of Iowa school districts and nearly 40% of elementary schools have chronic absenteeism rates among kindergartners that are over 10%. Average daily attendance may not reveal the extent of chronic absenteeism. For example, average daily attendance rates of 95% for kindergartners did include chronic absentee rates of 5% to more than 18%. Chronically absent students are more than 1.5 times less likely to be proficient in reading by the end of third grade. Governor Branstad and I are looking forward to the recommendations from the Iowa Chronic Absenteeism Advisory Council about how we can ensure that we better address this problem. And now it's my privilege to turn over the podium to Jean Cressy to tell you more about her work and what they've been doing to reduce chronic absenteeism. Jean?
Good morning. And I want to echo both the governor and lieutenant governor's sympathy for what happened in Orlando. It's devastating. Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for inviting me here today to talk about chronic absenteeism. Thank you also for the invitation to serve on the Iowa Chronic Absenteeism Advisory Council. In early 2012, United Way of Story County, along with 5 other communities in Iowa and 123 communities across the nation, joined the national campaign for grade level reading. In Iowa, we now have 11 communities that are part of that campaign, and we have created a network where we can learn from one another. The overall goal of the campaign is for all children to be reading at grade level by the end of third grade. But we know that if we wait until a child is in third grade, we have missed the opportunity. We also know that many things factor into a child's life and their ability to learn and thrive long before they begin school. Why are we involved? It is simple. We know that too many children, especially children from families with low incomes, miss too many days of school. Children can't afford to lose this time, especially in those early years when reading instruction is central to their curriculum. We also believe that schools cannot do this work in isolation. Communities must come together collectively and find solutions that work. In February 2015, our Iowa network partnered with Attendance Works. Attendance Works is a national and state initiative that promotes awareness of the important role that school attendance plays in academic success. This has given us an opportunity to learn from our peers and from outside experts and gather attendance data, which is important for community leaders. Hetty Chang, the executive director of Attendance Works, reminds us that communities working together on this issue must avoid making the common assumption that children miss school because their parents do not care. We know if we do nothing, there will be long-term consequences, not only for our children, but for our communities and for our nation as a whole. If left unchecked, this problem will undermine all of our efforts to end intergenerational poverty, close the achievement gaps, and reduce high school dropout rates. Early in our work in Ames, we worked with the Ames Community School District, and we revisited and revised its attendance policy, which now provides clear expectations and proactive communication with students and their families to support regular attendance. Annually, our community supports attendance through a campaign in the fall. We work with the mayor in the city of Ames for a proclamation declaring September School Attendance Awareness Month. The district also began identifying students with issues through the use of an early warning system that detects children who are at risk of dropping out of school. One of the 4 factors that is tracked is attendance. This process provides our administrators, counselors, and our teachers real-time data on students who are at risk. More importantly, it gives them the opportunity to intervene and work with students and families on the importance of attendance. Other communities in Iowa have experienced success in their attendance work. Dubuque launched its Up and Attend campaign using a superhero theme to get the message out that attendance is important. In the Quad Cities, 75 school leaders recently met with Hetty from Attendance Works in a day-long learning so that they could strengthen their work and attendance. In Waterloo, the Bell to Bell campaign emphasizes that every minute in school counts from the very beginning to stay through the day. In Des Moines, they have successfully reduced chronic absences for their kindergarten students from 14.7% to 7.9% by focusing on attendance early with those families. And lastly, in Council Bluffs, they have been working hard to impact attendance and decrease the percentages of students missing 10% or more days from 19% to 14%. What we have learned in our work so far is that the attendance data to use the attendance data as an early warning sign so that we can provide both students, that we can provide support before students miss so much school that it costs so much more for that missed instruction. So why are we involved? Because we know schools can't do it alone, and we know that chronic absence is a solvable problem, and forming the Iowa Chronic Absenteeism Advisory Council is a critical step in that solution. Thank you.
Well, Jean Cressy, thank you very much. And we'd answer your questions on this subject first.
So if kids aren't attending because parents don't care, why aren't they attending?
I think that's what we'll find out with the advisory council, that the reasons are many. In many cases, it's a working parent who is gone by 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. We found this in one of our elementary schools, and the child who was still in elementary school but able to walk to school fell back to sleep. The principal went to the door, knocked on the door, and woke him up. So that's one example. Other examples might be missing the school bus. It might be the fact that they've stayed up too late and it's very difficult for them to get up, or it might be because the family is so incredibly stressed that missing a day of kindergarten might not seem like a big deal, but in essence, it really is.
So what can actually be done?
That's the whole purpose
Well,
of
I think
that.
the whole idea is
Yeah.
to reach out and help these families that are having challenges. And that's why groups like the United Way are so important, because if you can have nonprofits and community volunteers that can help when they have these kind of crisis or problems, hopefully that can make a real difference. But I think Jean pointed out that the situation can be pretty complicated and maybe various and sundry reasons for it. But the fact is, chronic absenteeism in these early grades really does have a negative impact on the student's ability to learn to read.
And I think Jean ticked off a number of communities that have really seen a significant impacts by some of the processes that they put in place. And so this is an example through this advisory council to look at the different best practices and really, bring those together and raise awareness and help other school districts implement some of the programs that are working.
Other questions? Okay.
You said about 10 days ago that you thought $300 in terms of tuition increase. for
Right.
state students was too much. Now, two groups of students at the University of Iowa are suggesting $200 for all students. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I would compliment the students. Instead of just saying, no, we don't want to have any increase, they acknowledge there's a need for resources for the universities, but I think they've offered a reasonable compromise. So I would ask the Board of Regents to seriously look at that. I know the regions have the responsibility to see that the universities have adequate resources, but I also think they need to be cognizant of the impact that the tuition and fees have on the students and their families. So I think it's, just from what I've seen, it looks like a reasonable compromise that would provide significant additional money for the universities, but would not be as large an increase as was recommended by the Regents Board office.
So students at ISU and you and I embraced the $300 proposal. Do you think this $200 proposal should be system-wide for all three?
Well, I think the Regents have always tried to keep tuition pretty consistent across. So we don't want, so I think the general idea would be to have tuition pretty consistent for all three of the state universities. And I think that's been a reasonable policy on the part of the regents. Obviously, they have to sort through and look at all of the situation, the needs of each of the individual schools, and the impact that the increasing tuition has on the students. I'm proud of the fact that we have in recent years not had the kind of dramatic increases in tuition that we had several years ago, back, say, during the Vilsack administration, when it increased in some cases 17 or 18%. The increases have been, well, we had a couple of years of freeze and then modest increases. I'd like to see the increases be relatively modest so that we continue to reduce student debt and make sure that higher education is affordable for all Iowa families.
There was some criticism, maybe it was through some House Republicans, that the Board of Regents was asking for too much money. I'm just trying to understand what that narrative is. If they had sought a specific amount of money.
Well, what they had pointed out is that I think my recommendation was about $9 million increase of the legislature because of, and I understand the dilemma the legislature had. My budget was based on the December revenue estimate. Along came the March revenue estimate, reduced it by 46 million, which means, and most of the new money goes for education. K through 12 got the biggest chunk, but then the second would be, I guess, probably Medicaid and then higher ed. So they had to make tough decisions in the level of spending. And so they came in below my budget, but it was 6.7, something like that. Yeah, it's over 6 million anyway. And they were saying, but this tuition increase would generate, a lot more than that.
That's what they originally asked for, though, before you gave the recommendation.
Well, I understand that, but I don't think under these financial circumstances, nobody could expect to get that level of increase. So I think we're all in this together, and we went through the bird flu. We've seen what the fact that commodity prices have been below the cost of production. That has an impact, and we all have to deal with that. And we have a proud history of fiscal responsibility and living within our means. We're not Illinois, which hasn't had a budget for 2 years and which has this massive debt and deficit hanging over its head. And we don't want to be the federal government or Illinois. We want to continue to be responsible and make the tough decisions. And I think legislators felt that they did what they could under the circumstances, and they want the regents to also respect that. But I also understand the regents have to balance the needs of the university with the impact of increasing tuition and fees on the students and their families. So that's their responsibility. And that's why I thought that the recommendation that came from the students at the University of Iowa, which you could see students saying, no, we don't want any increase, but that's not what they said. They said, we'd accept a 200 rather than a 300 increase. Now that sounds to me as a reasonable compromise.
Can you tell us your personal reaction to the events in Orlando and what it means to Iowa?
Well, it's horrific. This is the deadliest mass shooting in our nation's history, and it is the latest in a series of Islamic terrorist attacks in America. We're aware of what happened in Paris and Brussels, but we've also had the situation at Fort Hood, the Boston Marathon, at Chattanooga, San Bernardino, and now Orlando. And I get briefed on a monthly basis about the terrorist threats. And there are terrorist threats in all 50 states. And we had a significant briefing for the governors during the winter meeting in the National Governors Association. So we have a group of Islamic radicals who are committed to destroying America and our way of life because they want to impose this caliphate. And if you don't accept their provision or their viewpoint, then you deserve to die. And we've seen, the beheadings, and we've seen the very gruesome things that they've done. And this is just the latest. And I guess I am disappointed that the president continues to be in denial of the extent of this threat. And it's very serious, and it's occurred time and time again now in this country. And I don't think we can continue to be on the defensive. I think we have to go after them in a much more dramatic way where they are in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and other countries. We also have to step up our efforts here at home to identify domestic terrorists that have been radicalized by these Islamic extremists and want to do damage to Americans here.
If somebody on a watch list applied for concealed weapons permit here, would they be denied?
Well, they weren't. And this individual had been, as you know, interviewed a couple of times by the FBI, and he was actually working for a security company. So he had the ability to purchase these weapons. I think, just as an example, I know that people that want to get a suppressor for their firearm, which is legal, in which we pass a law authorizing in Iowa, they have to wait months and months to get that. While they do have to wait months and months to get a suppressor, we have a situation where an individual like this can, and I guess that underscores the need to be really vigilant in determining who are threats and not be so concerned about political correctness that we don't aggressively investigate those people that are saying things that threaten Americans.
Two parts for you. Does this change the way, or do you think that this should change with for allowed to legally obtain automatic rifles?
No.
And second of all, do you think
First of all, I do think that there ought to be better communications between the FBI and the people that are in charge of permits to purchase firearms, but I don't think that we should restrict the honest, law-abiding citizen from being able to purchase firearms.
for this was a law-abiding citizen?
Well, except the FBI had twice within the last few years heard from coworkers that this person was a threat and saying things about killing Americans. Now, unfortunately, they didn't, I guess, feel they had enough evidence to bring criminal charges. But you know, we put people on a watch list and restrict their travel by airplane. It seems to me that we need to be looking at this very seriously in order to protect the citizens of this country, especially in light of the fact that we're up against an enemy that is doing all it can to instigate the killing of innocent people wherever they can, be it the Boston Marathon, be it at a nightclub or at a place of work. It doesn't matter.
Speaking about political correctness, just this morning, Trump has made references suggesting that Obama was involved with the mass shooting in Orlando. What do you think of that? Kind of saying, quote, he's got something else in mind.
Well, I guess his problem, as far as I'm concerned, is Obama has consistently denied the seriousness of this threat, and it's grown and grown. And I believe the leader of this country needs to stand up and have the guts to say, we have Islamic extremists that are committed to killing us. And the individual that committed this heinous crime actually called 911 and indicated his commitment to ISIS and the fact that he was radicalized, that he was indeed involved in that. And I think that's pretty evident. I think it's pretty clear. And I just think the leader of the country ought to have the guts to say what it is. Now, that doesn't condemn every Muslim But it does say there is a certain radical element of Islam that is committed to destroying our way of life and killing as many people as possible.
Should we have a presidential candidate making such kind of speculation about the president?
Well, I guess my disappointment is that we have a president that has not taken their threat seriously, and we need to change that. We need new leadership in this country. Well, first of all, he ought to acknowledge this is an act of terror by an Islamic extremist that is connected with and committed to the destruction of our way of life.
But he said he should go over there. Does that mean
That-
send brown troops?
Well, we already are, but we're only doing it half-heartedly, and we're not making the effort. I mean, they have stepped up the efforts in Iraq, but I think it should have been done years ago. And now we're starting to do it, but we're still only doing it in a very modest way. And I think it's going to take a much more aggressive, it's obviously not deterred them, even though some progress has been made on the ground over there in Iraq.
Sarah?
Sandy Hook, Columbine, Aurora, Oklahoma City, do we have like an Islamic extremist problem and then also like good problem? Because it's like these mass shootings and these acts of terrorists happen, and it's not just like people who are identified as Muslim.
Okay. Well, first of all, the incidents that you talk about were not part of the Islamic extremist effort, but the ones I've talked about, Fort Hood, the Boston Marathon, Chattanooga, San Bernardino, Orlando, all are. Now, well, the answer is just not to disarm the law-abiding citizens in this country. That's what some people want to do. That's not going to get this job done. It didn't, in the places that have the strictest gun control have not been successful in stopping it either.
There's speculation this guy had mental health issues. Is this really?
Well,
Florida has some of the most, the best gun laws in terms of the gun lobby. You could shoot somebody in your home and not get charged. And you have a right to defend yourself.
well, I guess we can speculate all we want on this, but what we know is the facts is this particular individual was declaring his allegiance to ISIS and wanted to demonstrate for ISIS that he could make a real difference in killing a bunch of Americans.
But the gentleman who showed up at Planned Parenthood in, I believe it was Colorado, for him it was Christian.
Well, that individual and anybody else that takes an innocent life needs to be brought to justice. That's a criminal matter. This is not a criminal matter. This is an international group that is committed to destroying our way of life. And there's a difference, and there's a distinction that I think we need to make. Now, we want to protect everybody. We want to maintain the freedom, the liberty, the security that we have enjoyed in this country forever. I was just yesterday in Kyoto, Iowa, to dedicate a memorial to the, in a little town of Kyoto, over 1,000 people showed up to show their respect to all the men and women that have fought to protect our freedom throughout our history. And I was so impressed with the turnout and with the level of patriotism. But at the same time, here we are, in that very day that we're dedicating that, we see this terrible tragedy occurring on our own soil, really with the direction and support of an international terrorist group that has consistently advocated for and been able to recruit people in our own country to carry out these dastardly acts.
And Donald Trump has continued, has kind of ramped up his rhetoric about banning Muslims from coming into this country. Do you have a reaction to that, given that he was born in this country?
Well, his family came from Afghanistan.
So you think that
No,
this-
here's the thing. So we're afraid to say this individual, because of his background and because of the statements he made, we should not be afraid to investigate and to look into the threats that might be there. And I guess what I'm saying and what I think is important is that we take serious the security of our country and the threats that we have, both from international groups and people that are being motivated over the internet by them.
David, last question. Then you gotta go.
Governor, can you go back to what Kay was asking? Can you clarify what you're saying there? I think that one of the arguments is if this guy is a legal citizen.
Yeah.
And was locked up.
And right.
Should there have been a way, the FBI looked at him a couple times, never came up with enough to arrest him. But should he, during that period, have been able to obtain weapons? Because that, from my understanding, that's what Congress has looked at and decided not to put any kind of changes there.
Well, there is some similarity to the Fort Hood incident, you may recall. I think we do need to seriously review our procedures in dealing with people that are making threats, be it on the internet or to people in person, just because of the need to protect the safety of our citizens. And I think that is something that we've got to take seriously. I think we also need to respect and recognize the fact that a lot of this is being instigated by ISIS and Islamic terrorist groups that, are outside our country, but obviously have been able to generate a significant amount of followers within our country, some of whom are citizens.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.